Welcome to Showing Up Anyway, the podcast for people who are not perfect. On this show, we talk about intuitive eating, fitness without obsession, and healing your relationship with food and your body. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 4. Look who showed up. You did. And for today's topic, I thought it would be smart to talk a little about hunger, which is not as obvious a feeling as you might think. I have viewers and listeners and new clients who come to me all the time and tell me things like how they feel guilty about getting hungry, how they try and ignore it and push it off, how they can't even tell they're hungry until it's, too late and they're elbow deep in a box of whatever they can find, bag of chips or whatever. Hunger seems simple, but diet culture and your food rules have sort of taught you to mistrust it, which is why we talked about food rules in the last episode. So today is going to be about how to recognize your hunger and start to rebuild that trust. Before we get into anything else, we have to be on the same page about one thing. Hunger is not your enemy. That's the title of today's episode. It's not something you need to ignore or push past or fight. Getting hungry isn't a bad thing. It's also not a good thing. It's just a thing. It's your body's way of asking for care. When you get tired, you go sleep, right? That's what you need. When you're thirsty, you go drink. When you're hungry, you also need to eat in the same way. It's just that one big problem is that a lot of us eat when we're not hungry too, but we'll talk about that later. So hunger is not the enemy, but it is something that you need to be aware of. Think about it like the gas light in your car, right? If you're low on fuel, the little light comes on. That's an indicator that you need to get gas soon. But what happens if you try and ignore that light? You're going to run out of gas, right? What happens if you try to keep driving? Or you try and tell yourself that what you really need isn't gas, it's actually to put air in your tires. It's not going to work out for you very well, is it? And if I can use that gas analogy just one more time, have you ever judged yourself for filling up your gas tank? You haven't, right? Well, don't judge yourself for needing to eat either. Use those hunger cues as information and not as ammunition later to use against yourself. Healing your relationship with hunger starts by seeing it as an ally and not an enemy. We can agree that hunger is instinctive. Right? It's natural. You were born with the ability to feel hunger. Babies cry when they need food, right? That sense just doesn't disappear when you get older. It's just that oftentimes we're taught we have to fight it, to suppress it. Hunger is framed as something we need to try and trick or ignore. I'm sure you've been told if you're hungry, you should drink water, you should chew gum to try and trick your brain into thinking it's full. You've probably been praised before for ignoring it, skipping breakfast and instead of eating to fuel your body, just drinking coffee to hold you over. A lot of us fear hunger because we associate it with losing control. This is especially true for people with a history of disordered eating or chronic dieting. They think eating equals weight gain. Eating means losing control. It doesn't. Eating and overeating are not the same thing. And if you have a problem with overeating, it's oftentimes, ironically, because you waited too long to eat. Hunger has become moralized because society is obsessed with glorifying thinness. Good people have discipline. Bad people give in, right? That's what we're told. You're praised for choosing salad instead of eating what you really wanted, and diets that celebrate skipping meals like OMAD and IF, despite my best efforts, somehow still have a place in wellness culture. The harsh truth is that diet culture rewards hunger denial. Now that I think about it, it might even go deeper than that. For a lot of people, hunger has a history. If you've ever lived with food insecurity, hunger might feel traumatic. If you grew up in a home with chronic dieting, hunger might feel dangerous. If you had to earn meals when you were younger, hunger might feel like a punishment or a weakness. If you've ever been praised for willpower, hunger might feel like a failure. These completely valid fears get internalized and we start to believe that hunger makes us weak. And so we disconnect from it to feel safe or feel good. But hunger is a feature, not a bug. It's not something you have to outsmart. It's something you need to listen to. It's a daily invitation to care for yourself. And I encourage you to look at it that way. That said, everyone experiences hunger a little bit differently. How do you know you're hungry? Tummy growls, right? Yeah, that's everyone's answer. But that's only one way. How about when you're hangry, irritated easily? If you feel an energy drop midday and feel like a nap, might be a hunger cue. Lightheadedness, brain fog, dizziness, nausea, shakiness. I feel like I'm reading the side effects on a pill bottle. Difficulty concentrating can also be a sign of hunger. You start thinking about food more than normal. And because hunger cues can be so complex and be hard to recognize, we can't talk about hunger without also talking about self-care. If you don't know that your energy drop at 2 p.m. is because you're hungry or because you slept for 4 hours last night, might be time to look at how much you're prioritizing your sleep. Understanding and prioritizing your body's needs really strengthens your hunger awareness. If you sleep enough each night, you can confidently say that your need for a nap in the afternoon is not because you're tired, it's actually because it's a hunger cue. If you manage your stress well, you can confidently say that you're not just stress eating, you're actually hungry. And if you set proper boundaries, then you can confidently say that you're eating because you're hungry and not just because someone made you angry or upset that day. But obviously, the opposite is true too, right? Not prioritizing your basic needs and self-care is going to make recognizing your body's natural hunger cues that much harder. There's an acronym that I really like that I think will help you with this. It's HALT, and I'm going to tell you what that means. But first, if this conversation resonates with you and you want to go deeper, I do coach clients through this exact work. Building trust with your body, reconnecting with hunger and fullness cues, and learning to eat without guilt. And I have to tell you that because I have people all the time who say, Adam, I didn't know you coach clients, even though I talk about it, I feel like constantly. But if you are ready to take that next step, you can apply to work with me by using the link in the show notes. All right, now that I've got the self-promotion out of the way, HALT, what does it stand for? Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Now, obviously, these are not the only 4 feelings you're going to feel before you have an episode of self-sabotage, whatever that may be for you. But this is a really good place to start to check in with yourself and analyze your self-care. Am I hungry? If that's the case, if you're actually hungry, go and eat something. Are you angry or feeling any other feeling associated with anger? Are you lonely or feeling any other feeling associated with isolation? Or are you tired? So if you find yourself eating or restricting or doing whatever self-sabotage behavior you might do, halt and give yourself a chance to think about those 4 feelings. Once we've figured that out, maybe we can find a better way or a different way to cope with those feelings. HALT is not exclusively used for recognizing hunger. I like it more as a way to figure out your body's needs in a time where maybe you feel disconnected. Now, going back to hunger, if you've ignored your body's signals for years, it can be hard to feel those again. Sometimes you might not feel that growling in your tummy until you're absolutely starving. But I hope that now that we've brought some attention to them, you can start to look a little closer and say, okay, wow, I always get nauseous in the morning before breakfast. Now I'm going to try and eat something light and see if that helps. Because maybe it's a hunger cue. Or maybe I don't need that second energy drink at 3 p.m. I need to have a snack. Because it's not your job to fight hunger. It's your job to respond to it. Sometimes you only realize you are hungry after you eat. Now I want to introduce you to maybe the most powerful thing you'll ever use in reconnecting with your body. This is the hunger scale. The hunger scale goes from 0 to 10, and it's really separated into 3 different parts. 0, 1, and 2 is your overly hungry range, okay? This is where you're starving, you're shaky, you're dizzy. Then you have your normal eating range, which is 3 through 7, okay? 3 and 4 might be a polite hunger, just hungry enough to eat. 5 would be neutral. 6 and 7, that's like a comfortable place to stop. Maybe you're satisfied there, comfortably full. Then you have your overly full range, 8, 9, and 10. This is where you're very full, stuffed. Maybe you need to unbutton your pants or take off your belt. Ideally, I want you to start eating when you're about a 3 or a 4 and stop when you're about a 6 or a 7. You start eating, let's say, at a 4, you eat until about a 6, and then you stop eating and you wait until your hunger diminishes until you're about a 3 or a 4 again. If you wait much longer than that, you wait until you're a 2 or a 1 or a 0. Then what's going to happen? You're probably going to overeat until you're an 8, 9, or a 10. And then the cycle of binge and restrict starts. You skip your next meal because you're extra full, and then all of a sudden you're at a 0, 1, or a 2 again. And it's hard to get out of that cycle. So before you eat, check in with yourself often and figure out where on that scale you are. The problem is that a lot of people don't know when to stop eating. I started with a brand new client this week, and we talked about this, and they told me, wow, I have been eating until I've been uncomfortably full every meal. And part of that has to do with some of the food rules that we talked about last week, needing to finish the plate. But another part of it is that they were just never taught when they should stop eating. Now, I do want to say that the hunger scale is not about perfection, okay? It is a learning tool. It's not a pass or fail test. Part of this is going to be assessing how you feel, right? And then the other part of this is going to be having to reassess how you felt. There's going to be times where you thought you were a 2, but you were actually at a 4. and other times where you thought you were a 3, but you were actually at a 5. And this is going to change on a day-to-day basis because there's a lot of factors that go into how hungry you are that day. You can't just separate your hunger from the rest of your needs. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're not going to be hungry at 12:30 every day like clockwork. Things like sleep, hydration, emotional support, they're all going to go into your appetite. But how often do we find ourselves eating lunch at 12:30 every day? Now, if you have a job and that's your break time and that's the only time you can eat, that's a little bit different. But if you have some flexibility there, listen to your body. You don't have to eat breakfast as soon as you wake up, unless you're hungry. I distinctly remember more than one of my clients coming to me once we started implementing this and saying, Adam, I don't feel hungry until about 10:30 when I wake up. I used to wake up at 7 and have breakfast then because that's what I thought I needed to do. So it's going to take some self-reflection. And maybe there are times where you're hungry at 7, but that might be affected by the time you ate dinner last night or how big that dinner was. See how those things might be connected? This is why listening to your body is so important. Unfortunately, most of us live in our heads, and getting back into our body takes real practice. So I suggest doing some daily check-ins. Set a reminder to check in with yourself halfway through the day. How am I doing? Could these feelings that I'm feeling, could they be hunger? Take a pause in between tasks and think, have I eaten? If you have something like ADHD and you forget to eat often, okay, set some alarms for yourself. If you're autistic and you struggle with interoception, which is an awareness of your body's internal senses and signals, do a body scan. That's something that I actually learned from a client who is autistic. I love learning things from clients. She said, I can't tell when my body is hungry as naturally as neurotypical people. I have to do a body scan from head to toe and figure out, do I need to pee? Am I in danger? Or do I need to eat, or is it something else? And there was some real effort in having to figure out whether she was hungry or not. And so using some of these tools I've presented you today and some of the tools she already had that we learned together, she was able to get much better in touch with her body. Now, I will say that hunger is a very personal, subjective feeling. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not hungry. They don't know. Don't let anyone shame you for needing to eat. Not your parents, not your boss, not your partner, not your friends. You don't have to justify being hungry. You're allowed to eat when you feel that way. Just try to listen to your fullness as well, and we will talk about how to do that in a future episode. But for now, recognizing that giving yourself unconditional permission to eat when you're hungry is healing. When you can stop using food as a reward or a punishment, it just becomes nourishment. Honoring your hunger is a powerful act of respect and self-care. It is not a weakness. It is not a failure to be disciplined or something to apologize for. The people who told you that you needed to fight your body were wrong. You are worthy of nourishment. Don't try and control your hunger. Instead, trust it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Showing Up Anyway. You can find it for free on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And wherever you're listening, if you like the show, I'd love it if you gave me a 5-star review because that does help other people find the show. And hopefully it'll help change their life just like you're looking to change yours. If you're listening on Spotify, though, you can follow me and tap the bell icon so you get notifications when new episodes come out. I'm Coach Adam. Remember, when things get challenging, keep showing up anyway.